So this movie has two things going for it: a fantastic looking killer and an interesting and somewhat original idea. So this one is directed by Rene Perez and is called Playing with Dolls, also known as Cinderella Playing with Dolls, because our central heroine is named Cindy, you see. And the story here is basically this kind of older wannabe serial killer. He's an old rich guy basically. He's kind of obviously got too much time on his hands and he essentially wants to watch people die, but he doesn't have the kind of the physical prowess. It's, you know, he's got ailing health, so he can't physically kind of do the deeds himself, but he's got the money, so he basically sets up this kind of like massive house in the kind of remote snowy wilderness, sets it up with loads of cameras, and basically frees this kind of like slasher, for a better word, from prison, and lets him basically kill victims there, with the kind of the deal being that he can kind of watch and somewhat control what's going on in the kind of this kind of setup around this place. He's kind of got armed guards to prevent anyone from coming in, and it really focuses on this one female victim called Cindy, who is this kind of Ukrainian girl who is basically down on her luck, and she kind of accepts this job under the pretense that she's going to be kind of essentially a maid in this house and kind of looking after this, you know, very elderly person who doesn't actually exist, and you know, paid a good sum of money, etc. But obviously she's just going to be the next victim in this kind of like long line of victims basically. So like I said, I don't remember kind of seeing this particular concept before, so I do think it's somewhat of a kind of original twist, and does have some good ideas on this kind of slasher genre, which has been tried and tested, and you know, it's gone through many iterations, so it's kind of good to see someone trying to do something different with it. And like I say, the killer looks pretty cool. He's kind of got this like Leatherface type mask on with kind of barbed wire around it. He kind of looks quite cool. However, there are a few fundamental problems with this one. First of all, the majority of the shooting here is done in the daylight and in quite kind of bright lighting, and the slash doesn't seem as menacing in these kind of like, you know, well lit situations. There's a lot of kind of continuity errors and plot holes here. The first scene in the movie, we kind of see basically another victim running away from the killer, and it's kind of snowing in that scene, and we see a policeman basically hear her scream, but in that scene it's not snowing, and things like that. But and how the cameras move and how they operate, there's loads of kind of little plot holes here and there basically, that kind of just seem kind of fairly obvious when you're watching them, but obviously they haven't been picked up when this kind of the movie's being shot. I have to say also the acting is pretty bad. The biggest name here is Richard Tyson, and he basically plays the kind of the kind of controller, kind of like murderer guy. He's not the best actor in the best of times, but he's the biggest name in this kind of movie. The other thing I think that will kind of, and I've seen some criticism about this movie, and I somewhat agree with it, and is that it kind of, not a lot happens in the kind of the main bulk of the movie. We kind of have this, the initial scene with the kind of the first victim, and then it kind of goes into you know, somewhat violent finale. But the kind of the main section is this really this killer stalking this girl, but he's under instructions not to kill her first of all. So all he's kind of doing is being creepy around her, and how this woman doesn't know that there's someone else in this house that are walking around. This guy's a big guy, yet she never seems to kind of catch sight of him, is a little bit silly. The climax too, I have to say, is a little disjointed for me. It kind of ends up being more of an action film in the kind of the last kind of 10-15 minutes here. It's kind of have this kind of friendly cop who kind of turns up and has this like blazing gun battle with all these kind of like mercenaries that are protecting this kind of the property, and that's essentially where the most of the kind of the deaths come from, is this kind of gunfight, and not the actual serial killer himself. And the confrontation with the serial killer is somewhat disappointing, and the actual ending of this film, I would say, will be very unsatisfying for a lot of people. However, they've already finished making the sequel, so obviously it's going to sort of carry on. But like I said, as a standalone film, I felt it kind of left it with many threads hanging. It looks like it was literally just cut, and there was no resolution in it essentially. So I feel that the the ending will be very dissatisfying unless you kind of just watch the kind of sequel straight afterwards, basically. But like I said, on the plus side, it does have some original concepts. I kind of do like the serial killer. I wish it was maybe shot a little bit differently, and it had more of a horror aesthetic to it rather than a kind of this action film aesthetic, which I kind of felt was a little bit kind of didn't kind of suit the movie, if that makes sense. There are a couple of scenes where we see various kind of body parts kind of strung up. There's very little gore here, actually, but from what I did see, it kind of the actual practical side of the effects and stuff just didn't look too bad, I got to say, but we don't really see much of it, so that was kind of disappointing, because it looked like what they had done was done quite well, but it would have been nice to have seen more of this and maybe have more of a horror film rather than this kind of like action kind of horror that we actually have here. So a little bit disappointing, I have to say. Some good ideas, and like I said, maybe there's the potential here for this kind of this serial killer to become a bit more menacing. I think it kind of needs to have a slightly different direction in regards to the sequel, but that's already been filmed, so probably too late to change that. So I'm going to give this movie a 3.5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.